Across the turbulent Atlantic in 1587, a band of intrepid English settlers arrived on the shores of what is now known as North Carolina. Led by the esteemed Sir Francis Drake, they had braved storms and the threat of Spanish galleons to establish a colony on the mysterious Roanoke Island. But within 3 years, the entire settlement had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only one clue to their sudden disappearance: the cryptic carving of a single word, Croatoan, on a nearby tree. But what drove these settlers to this wild frontier, and what secrets did they uncover? Join us as we delve into the gripping tale of the lost colony of Roanoke. He chose the name Virginia in honor of the Virgin Queen, Elizabeth I, hoping that the colony would prosper. However, disaster struck when a supply ship arrived from England carrying not only essential provisions, but also a contingent of new settlers. With more people came the risk of disease, and unfortunately, a deadly outbreak of dysentery swept through the colony, claiming the lives of many, including John White's daughter and granddaughter. Grief-stricken and desperate to find a cure for his ailing wife, John White decided to return to England for medical help, leaving the colony in the care of his friend, Governor John Dare. Supplies mysteriously vanished from storage, livestock was found dead without a trace, and whispers of a lurking Native American tribe sent shivers down their spines. Fear and paranoia gripped the settlers, driving them to the brink of madness. As tensions escalated, accusations flew, and suspicion fell upon the Native Americans, whom the settlers believed to be the source of their misfortune. Armed to the teeth, they prepared to defend themselves against the supposed impending attack, their determination to survive the ordeal at any cost unwavering. As night fell, casting long shadows and amplifying their fears, the settlers huddled together, their fate hanging in the balance. Little did they know that their survival would depend on the decisions they made in the coming hours. The attack was imminent, and the battle for their lives had begun. And bring glory to their monarch, just as the mythical queen of the Amazons had done. Elizabeth, the daughter of Governor White, had been captured by the Native Americans. Panic surged through the settlement as the colonists grappled with the gravity of the situation. With their defenses weakened by the absence of key figures like Governor White and John Dare, they were left vulnerable to the relentless attacks of the Native Americans. Their search led them deep into the heart of the forest, where they discovered unsettling evidence of an unknown presence. The clash between the two cultures was intense, marked by bloodshed and the clang of steel on steel. But despite their valiant efforts, the colonists found themselves gradually overwhelmed. As the battle raged on, the settlers' hope began to dwindle. Their strength ebbed, and their fate appeared sealed. With the absence of their leaders and the relentless onslaught of the Native Americans, the colony's demise seemed inevitable. To their horror, they found the bodies of several colonists who had been brutally murdered, their settlements ransacked, and their crops destroyed. The victors, unaware of the profound impact their actions would have on history, claimed the land as their own. Years later, when Sir Francis Drake returned to the island, he found no trace of the colonists except for the haunting remnants of their settlements and the chilling clue carved on a tree, Croatoan, hinting at their mysterious fate. To this day, the enigma of the lost colony of Roanoke continues to captivate historians and adventurers alike, leaving us to ponder the countless stories that lie hidden within the annals of history. But rather a horrifying spectacle that sent them reeling in disbelief. Before them stood a group of menacing Native Americans, their faces painted in fierce battle colors, their eyes gleaming with hostility. With each pounding of the drum, their animosity towards the English became more evident, threatening to engulf the colony in violence and destruction. Overwhelmed with fear and uncertainty, they fled back to the safety of the fort, their quest for answers left unfinished. Unfortunately, he too fell ill and passed away, leaving the colony leaderless and vulnerable. Whispers of a curse and supernatural forces at play sent chills down their spines. With dwindling food supplies and the threat of an unknown enemy, their fate hung in the balance. But as the situation grew increasingly desperate, a glimmer of hope emerged. A faint sound carried on the wind, the rhythmic beat of a drum. Could it be the supply ship they had been waiting for? Hope surged through the settlers as they raced to the shore to investigate. Relief washed over the colonists as they received the medical attention and supplies needed to fight the deadly disease. One young woman, Eleanor Dare, eagerly awaited the arrival of her husband, who was returning from a trip to England. Filled with hope for his safe return, she gave birth to a baby girl and named her Virginia in anticipation of her father's arrival. However, as weeks turned into months, there was still no sign of the supply ship or her husband. The colonists' spirits began to dwindle once again. But before succumbing to the disease, he entrusted his wife, Eleanor Dare, with a secret, one that would change the course of the colony's history forever. Our story begins in the late 16th century, a time when European powers were eager to expand their territories and wealth. England, under the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, was no exception. Drake led a group of about 120 settlers across the Atlantic in 1585. Caught between starvation and the threat of attack, the colonists faced a grim future. Just when all hope seemed lost, Sir Francis Drake returned with a fleet of ships bearing much-needed supplies and reinforcements. The colony was saved, but Drake soon departed again, leaving the settlement under the leadership of John White, an artist and cartographer. They landed on an island they named Roanoke after the local Native American tribe, and began constructing a fort and houses. But their idyllic colony was threatened by the harsh environment and dwindling food supplies. Soon, the settlers found themselves on the brink of starvation. Desperate for help, they sent a plea for assistance back to England. However, the path to colonial success was fraught with challenges, including the formidable Spanish Empire, which dominated the seas and fiercely protected its vast American holdings. But England had a secret weapon: Sir Francis Drake, a legendary privateer who had successfully raided Spanish settlements and treasure ships, amassing great wealth for himself and England's crown. Determined to establish a permanent English presence in North America. Meanwhile, the Spanish, eager to crush the English colony and protect their own territorial claims, dispatched a squadron of warships to destroy the settlement. As John White prepared to oversee the construction of a new fort, he realized that the colony needed a name that would inspire hope and attract new settlers. Undeterred by the hardships of the past year, the colonists pressed on with the construction of their new fort, determined to make the colony of Virginia a success. As the governor, John Dare worked tirelessly to ensure the survival of the colony, providing leadership and guidance during these perilous times. Amidst the chaos and despair, a glimmer of hope emerged with the arrival of an English supply ship. In the midst of the growing despair, a sense of unease settled over the colony as strange occurrences began to unfold. Determined to uncover the truth, a group of brave colonists set out to investigate the source of their misfortunes. As the settlers huddled together inside the fort, their fear grew with each passing day. To their utter dismay, however, what they saw before them was not the salvation they had dreamed of. In the face of this imminent danger, the colonists barricaded themselves inside the fort, desperately trying to fortify their defenses. In the early hours of the morning, as the colonists anxiously awaited the dawn, a blood-curdling scream pierced the silence, shattering the fragile peace that had settled over the fort. Fueled by desperation, the colonists mounted a daring counterattack, fiercely defending their homeland against the encroaching darkness. And so the massacre continued until the settlers had fallen, their dreams of establishing a new life in the New World cut tragically short. Let's go back in time. The year is 1585, and England has been ruled by the ambitious and enigmatic Queen Elizabeth I for almost 3 decades. Her reign has seen the English ascend as a naval power, and their influence spreads around the world. But, as we all know, that power was built on blood, specifically the blood of the Irish people who suffered greatly at the hands of the English crown. We will see how he assembled a team of experts and gathered supplies for the colony. His reputation was at stake after his previous failure to establish a colony in North Carolina. He also recruited some of the best craftsmen and artisans in England who could build ships, tools, weapons, and supplies for the colony. He knew that the Spanish were powerful and aggressive, and that they would not allow the English to establish a colony near them. He knew that he needed to find a place that was far enough away from the Spanish territory, but also accessible and habitable. He knew that the Spanish were constantly spying on him and his activities, and that they would try to sabotage his mission. They left England with great fanfare and excitement. The people of England had never seen anything like this before. They had never sent a colony to the New World, and they were eager to hear about the adventures and discoveries of Raleigh and his crew. But they also had mixed feelings about the journey. They knew that the crew would face many dangers and hardships, and they feared that they might not return alive. They were running out of food and water, and they were plagued by scurvy and other diseases. He decided to name it Virginia in honor of the Virgin Queen, and he began planning for the settlement. They cleared the land, planted crops, and raised livestock. So let me ask you, would Raleigh's dream of a new colony survive the dangers of the unknown? You decide in the comments below. Thank you for watching. They also set up a fort to protect themselves from attacks by Native Americans or other European powers. The settlers faced many challenges, such as harsh weather, unfamiliar plants and animals, and conflicts with Native Americans. But they were determined to succeed, and they worked hard to make their colony thrive. Despite the challenges, the colony of Virginia grew and prospered. The settlers produced food, raised livestock, and traded with other colonies and countries. They also explored the surrounding areas and established new settlements. He appointed leaders for different aspects of the colony, such as agriculture, defense, and trade. He also set up a system of laws in order to ensure that the colony ran smoothly. He then returned to England to report his findings to Elizabeth I and to secure more funding and supplies for the colony. He told the Queen about the island's natural beauty and its potential for trade and agriculture, and he asked for her support in establishing the colony. Elizabeth I was thrilled by Raleigh's report, and she granted him more funding and supplies for the colony. She also sent him a group of settlers, including men, women, and children, who were eager to start a new life in the New World. Just when they were about to give up, they spotted land. It was an island off the coast of North Carolina, and Raleigh named it after the English Queen, Elizabeth I, who had been the driving force behind the colony. Raleigh then led a small group of men ashore while the rest of the crew stayed on board the ships. As soon as they set foot on the island, they realized that they had found a paradise. There were lush forests, clear rivers, and plenty of wildlife. They also found evidence that the island had been inhabited by Native Americans, but there was no sign of any settlements or plantations. He knew that he needed to keep his plans and his preparations hidden until the last moment. He looked back at the receding shoreline, knowing that he might never see England again. And he himself was wounded in battle with the Spanish. But despite these setbacks, Raleigh and his crew pressed on. They explored the coast of North America, looking for a suitable place to establish their colony. They encountered various Native American tribes, some of whom were friendly and helpful, while others were hostile and warlike. Raleigh and his crew also had to contend with the harsh environment of the New World. They faced extreme temperatures, unfamiliar plants and animals, and a lack of supplies. However, Raleigh's determination and leadership skills helped him and his crew overcome these obstacles. He established the first English colony in North America at Roanoke, and he returned to England with valuable resources such as timber and minerals. Despite the hardships and challenges they faced, Raleigh's journey to Virginia was a significant achievement. It marked the beginning of England's colonial empire and established Raleigh as one of the most famous explorers of his time. He felt the wind in his hair and the spray of the ocean on his face, and he knew that he was about to embark on one of the greatest adventures of his life. As the ship sailed into the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, Raleigh felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. He knew that he was about to discover new lands and new peoples, but he also knew that he would face many dangers and challenges along the way. He used his network of spies and informants to gather information about the Spanish, and he used his skills as a courtier to deceive them. He studied maps, charts, and reports from previous explorers, and he gathered information from sailors and traders who had traveled to the New World. He also sent spies and scouts to the Spanish colonies to gather information and to find weaknesses. He knew that he needed to be prepared for any eventuality. He made sure that he had a diverse and talented group of people who could handle any situation that might arise. He also took precautions for the journey. He knew that the seas were rough and unpredictable, and that the crew would face storms, hunger, and diseases. He made sure that the ships were strong and well-equipped. He also packed food, water, and medicine for the crew, and he brought livestock, seeds, and plants for the colony. And he needed to impress Elizabeth I, who was the key to his success. If he could succeed where other explorers had failed, he would win her favor and secure his place in history. He knew that Elizabeth I was interested in expanding England's power and wealth, and that she was eager to compete with the Spanish. He presented her with a detailed plan for the colony, and he promised her that it would bring glory and profit to England. He also reminded her of the threat posed by the Spanish, and he appealed to her sense of national pride and security. But he also had to deal with opposition. There were many people in England who were skeptical or hostile towards the colony. They thought it was too risky or too expensive, or they feared that it would provoke the Spanish. Raleigh had to convince them that the colony was a good investment and that it was worth the risks. He used his charm, his charisma, and his logic to persuade them, and he won them over to his cause. But he also had something personal to prove. Raleigh was a soldier and an adventurer, but he was also a courtier and a gentleman. He had to maintain his dignity and his honor in a dangerous and uncertain environment. He could not afford to be reckless or careless. He needed to be strategic and resourceful. And we will learn how he dealt with the challenges and setbacks that threatened to derail his mission. You are watching this channel. Join me as we uncover the story behind Raleigh's preparations for his historic voyage to Virginia. It is an epic tale of ambition, rivalry, and the quest for glory in a time when England was becoming a global power. And not only Ireland, but also Wales and Scotland. But Elizabeth I had even bigger plans for her homeland. She dreamed of building an empire in the New World, a place that she had never seen but had heard so much about. And she wanted to do it before the rest of Europe claimed everything. So she turned to one of her most trusted advisors, Sir Walter Raleigh, a man with a troubled past but brilliant ideas about what England could become. He proposed a daring plan to establish a colony in North America, which they would call Virginia in honor of the Virgin Queen. But this was not just a simple exploration. This was a full-scale attack on the reaches of the Spanish Empire, the greatest power in the world at the time. And Raleigh knew that he had only one chance to make it work. Today, We will explore the beginnings of this great adventure and how Raleigh prepared for his journey to the unknown. Raleigh had a lot riding on this mission. He started by assembling a team of experts. He hired navigators, pilots, soldiers, settlers, and scholars who were experienced and skilled in their fields. But perhaps the most important thing that Raleigh did was to gather intelligence. One of the most important things that Raleigh did was to secure the support of the Queen. But perhaps the most important thing that Raleigh did was to keep secrets. And finally, the day came when Raleigh and his crew set sail for the New World. Raleigh stood on the deck of his ship as it sailed away from the English coast. Raleigh's journey to Virginia was fraught with peril. His ships were battered by storms. His crew was plagued by disease. As the days turned into weeks, Raleigh and his crew began to lose hope. Raleigh knew that he had found the perfect place to establish the colony. As the settlers arrived in Virginia, they began to build their homes and farms. Raleigh had accomplished his mission, and he had created a new empire for England. Could a new group of settlers succeed where the first failed? The year before, England's first attempt at colonization had ended in disaster. After the settlement's disappearance, only the skeletal remains of a fort and the cryptic word Croatoan carved into a post remained as evidence that it had ever existed. But Drake's rescue mission had been successful. And now the English crown wanted to build on that success and establish a permanent colony in North America. But this second chance would not be a repeat. Not only were the stakes higher this time, but so was the danger. At first, the English traded peacefully with the local tribes, bartering iron tools and other goods for food. However, when Lane attempted to shake hands with the chief, he was attacked by one of the chief's warriors. But the chief refused, leading to an all-out attack by the English. What followed was a chaotic battle, leaving multiple natives dead and the rest fleeing into the forest. Although the English had won the battle, they had lost valuable time and resources and made no progress towards establishing peaceful relations. Fearing for his life, Lane drew his sword and killed the attacker. And in the end, only a handful of the original 120 colonists returned to tell the tale. This marked the end of the first attempt to establish an English colony in North America and cast a shadow of doubt on the future of colonization efforts. The men were forced to ration their supplies, as the unforgiving terrain of Roanoke Island offered little sustenance. He had high hopes for the success of the venture and eagerly awaited news of its progress. But he still held out hope that they had managed to establish a small settlement. Upon learning of the disastrous outcome of the first expedition, Raleigh was devastated. As the new colonists began to settle in and establish their homes, Raleigh hoped that this time would be different. Under the leadership of John White, the colonists built sturdy houses, established farms, and forged alliances with some of the local Native American tribes. For a while, it appeared as though Raleigh's efforts to establish a permanent English colony in North America might finally be successful. Would the lessons learned from the previous failures lead to success? Or were the challenges of the New World too great to overcome? The colony faced numerous hardships, including disease, famine, and attacks from rival tribes. Many began to dream of returning to England, longing for the familiar comforts of home. He left his daughter and son-in-law in charge of the settlement, believing that they could hold it together until his return. But what he didn't know was that he would not see them again for 11 long years. Among them was John White's daughter, Eleanor, who fell in love with a young colonist named Ananias Dare. It also highlights the importance of understanding and respecting the cultures and environments of the places we seek to conquer. This mystery has captivated historians for centuries, with many theories attempting to explain what happened to the lost colony of Roanoke. The legacy of the lost colony of Roanoke lives on, not only in the annals of history, but also in the names and places that bear witness to their presence. The English weren't the only Europeans to try and colonize North America. The Spanish had established a settlement in Florida in 1559, but it was abandoned 2 years later. The French also made several attempts to colonize Canada in the 16th century, but these efforts were mostly unsuccessful as well. The Dutch would eventually become the first Europeans to establish a permanent colony in North America with the founding of New Amsterdam in 1624. Despite these challenges, the colonists persevered, determined to make a life for themselves in the New World. But the truth remains elusive, adding to the intrigue of one of America's earliest mysteries. He learned from the mistakes of the past and assembled a team of experienced leaders, Sir Francis Drake and Sir Richard Grenville, to oversee the new colony. He also ensured that the colonists were better prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. When the ships returned to England without the promised riches, he was deeply concerned. And curiosity in those who seek to uncover the truth behind their disappearance. But this joy was short-lived. Soon after the birth of Virginia Dare, the colony faced a crisis that would test their resilience like never before. With a renewed sense of determination, Raleigh sent the third group of colonists to Roanoke in 1587. When Eleanor gave birth to a baby girl, she and her husband chose to name her Virginia, after the region that the English hoped to conquer. This seemingly insignificant act would have a lasting impact on the naming of the New World. This time there were 115 men, women, and children who landed on the shores of the island with dreams of building a new life in an untamed wilderness. Even the abundant wildlife proved elusive, requiring constant and often unsuccessful efforts to capture. As weeks turned into months, the colonists' resolve began to dwindle, mirroring the depletion of their food stores. To make matters worse, the loss of the colonists had dealt a blow to England's reputation as a colonial power. Raleigh felt the weight of this failure heavily and knew that he had to take action to restore his reputation and the faith of the crown in his abilities. While Lane claimed that his actions were done in self-defense, the incident quickly escalated into a conflict between the two groups. However, these interactions were strained due to the colonists' inability to understand the native languages and customs. This lack of understanding culminated in a violent clash when a party of English explorers led by Lane and two others entered a Sicatan village unannounced. As the settlers struggled to survive in an alien landscape, they would face attacks from a powerful Native American tribe and desperate measures to defend themselves. With no other options left, the colonists dismantled their fort and set off into the unknown, hoping that their supplies and navigational skills would guide them to safety. But as they ventured further into the wilderness, the reality of their fate became increasingly clear. Welcome to my channel. This is the story of the first expedition to the newfound land of Roanoke. Eventually, they reached the coast and realized that their only chance of rescue lay in reaching the Spanish settlements in Florida. However, the seas were rough and their small boat provided little protection against the elements. The year before, Sir Francis Drake had sailed into Chesapeake Bay and rescued 8 survivors of the first English colony. In 1585, 2 ships carrying around 120 colonists arrived off the coast of North Carolina. They had been contracted by Sir Walter Raleigh to settle on the Roanoke, which he believed would become the next great center of wealth and power for the English Empire. They discovered signs of recent habitation, including old cooking fires, and soon encountered several small groups of Native Americans. These encounters were initially friendly, but the colonists' hope for peaceful coexistence soon turned to fear. But instead of finding a bustling metropolis, the colonists encountered nothing but a dense forest and tall grassy plains. Their leader, Ralph Lane, described it as a wilderness without either wood or water. And that was just the beginning of their problems. After building a fort to protect themselves from the elements and any potential enemies, the colonists began exploring the surrounding area. There were three main tribes living in the area: the Croatoan, the Croatoan, and the Chickasaw. They had traveled inland about 20 miles and were met by the village chief, who greeted them peacefully. With tensions high, the English demanded that the villagers hand over the man who had attacked him. This conflict with the native tribes tested the limits of the colonists' survival skills. The situation became so dire that the colony's leader, Ralph Lane, made the difficult decision to abandon the settlement and seek help from the Spanish in nearby Florida. Their journey through the dense undergrowth was arduous and dangerous, filled with encounters with wild animals and the constant threat of starvation. As their journey continued, their hope for rescue began to fade. Meanwhile, back in England, Sir Walter Raleigh was unaware of the fate of the colonists he had sent to Roanoke. He knew that the harsh conditions and conflicts with the native tribes had made it difficult for the colonists to thrive. He had invested significant time, effort, and money into the project, and had envisioned it as a source of great pride and profit for England. Determined to succeed where his first attempt had failed, he began planning for a third expedition to Roanoke. They were given supplies to last longer, weapons to defend themselves, and instructions to maintain peaceful relations with the native tribes. Among them was a young man named John White, an artist and cartographer, who would play a pivotal role in documenting the fate of the colony. The third attempt at settling Roanoke Island seemed promising at first, but as the years passed, the realities of the situation began to emerge. However, the strain of living in such a hostile environment was evident in the dwindling number of colonists who were willing to stay. The couple decided to marry and have a child, a decision that would have far-reaching consequences for the colony and for history itself. And while it did not bring prosperity to the struggling colony, it did contribute to the eventual triumph of the English in North America. John White, unable to bear the hardships of the colony any longer, decided to return to England for supplies and reinforcements. When he finally returned to Roanoke, he found the settlement deserted, with the only clue to the colonists' fate being the word Croatoan carved into a post. Some believe that the colonists were killed and absorbed into the Native American population, while others suggest they simply moved to another location. The fate of the Roanoke colonists serves as a reminder of the challenges and hardships faced by those who sought to explore and settle new lands. As we continue to learn more about the history of our world, we can gain a deeper appreciation for the sacrifices and struggles of those who came before us. From the Croatoan people to the state of North Carolina, the memory of those who called Roanoke home continues to inspire wonder.